So the Betfair Expert Fee has been launched, and it was launched to get rid of the Betfair premium charge, but also to remove a large number of people that could have possibly fallen into the clutches of the premium charge. Now, since the expert fee has been launched, I've seen some people sort of worrying about whether they will pay it or not. And some people have grasped the wrong end of the stick in terms of how these charges are going to be applied. So I thought it was worth doing a video just to clear that up and answer that key pivotal question: are you going to pay the Betfair expert fee? So with the launch of the Betfair Expert Fee, obviously there was a bit of discussion around various different aspects of it, which I will attempt to cover in this video. But the key headline numbers that you need to be aware of is that over 50% of people will no longer pay the premium charge. And of those that do pay any sort of charges, 80% of them will pay significantly less. And when you look at that, there are clear reasons why that's the case, which I'll come on to for a second. But one of the discussions that popped up was, do Betfair need to levy this particular charge at all? Couldn't they just exist on standard commission? Now, I would love an exchange where you just had a fixed rate of commission and no additional charges. But there has been a flaw within the exchange model for a large number of years, where it's clear that a small number of people do win very large amounts of money. And, not everybody is at that end of the market. But whether you look at it from a commercial perspective or from the viability of the exchange, one of the things that I have always been keen to sort of get across is I would actually rather pay higher rates of commission and have an exchange that's completely viable. And by viable, I mean where you're betting against other people, rather than an exchange that has an incredibly low rate of commission, but where that ecosystem vanishes basically. And we've seen that divergence within the betting exchange marketplace already. It's not discussed very much. But if Betfair suddenly decided to take the other side of the book, and I had to trade and bet against them, then of course there is only going to be one winner in that scenario, because you're back to this typical bookmaker type model. So throughout my career, I've sort of said, well, small levels of commission probably isn't enough. I'd rather pay a bit more and keep the whole thing intact. Now, when we talk about it from an ecosystem perspective, you could say that, you've got to keep people in that pool, but also look at it from a commercial, corporate perspective. The business model needs to work, and it needs to be growing and expanding and a decent business and stuff like that. And I'm not being an apologist here for higher rates and additional charges and so on. What I'm trying to say to you here is that if we have a viable system, then that system can continue on for a large number of years. We could talk endlessly about what is the right rate and whether it's justified or not and the reasons for introducing it and so on. But exchanges do sort of fundamentally have this intrinsic problem of the way that, you have winners, you have losers, and those winners pay a commission, but fundamentally they end up taking a large chunk of the pie. And the whole thing has to be viable from one perspective. Even if you look at it, and I know profit is a dirty word and corporate greed and all of those things, even if you look at it from that perspective, I still think it's important to come to terms with the fact that the business model has to be viable and growing and have money for reinvestment and have an impact. Because when you lose that, then you could end up back in the old world that we used to be in. So I would much prefer if we had an exchange-only ecosystem and a sportsbook-only system and a casino-only ecosystem, and they were all separate and stood on their own merits, because then everything becomes a little bit more transparent. But the fact is we don't have that. I'm not sure that we ever will have that. But we do need to fight our corner in terms of exchanges. And when I produce videos, I'm trying to explain to people how good exchanges are and why they should use them. And, we need to continue to push that message, because it's clear that most recreational punters and your average Joe doesn't really understand exchanges. And it's important for me to keep that viable. It's important for you, it's important for everybody in this ecosystem, and we have to find a progressive way forward. And that's why I welcomed the expert fee, because it is a progressive way forward. It's much better than the old mechanism that we had, and I'm glad to be shot of the previous premium charges. So one of the things that I think I could have explained better on the original expert fee video was the bandings, because you have 3 different bands, £0 to £25,000. There are no additional fees. That's what takes a huge amount of people out of any particular additional charges. And then you've got 25 to 100 where you pay 20%, and then above £100,000 you will pay at 40%. But a lot of people misinterpreted this as though if they suddenly start making money, they suddenly have to pay additional fees, whereas that is not actually the case. Because when you look at your lifetime P&L, that will influence the rate at which you're likely to pay and when you start paying it. Because the important thing to note is if you've been unprofitable in the past or sort of just below break even or something like that, that creates a huge buffer that you will have to eat through before you even get considered for paying any particular charges. So if your lifetime P&L is negative and then you suddenly start making money, it means that you will not pay charges until you have got your lifetime P&L into positive territory. So a lot of people miss that. People just assumed that if they made some money over the course of a year, they would suddenly have to pay additional fees. No, you don't. And there's another huge caveat related to that, which I will talk about in a second, that means that even if you did make reasonable amounts of money, you may still not pay additional charges. I need to explain it in a bit more depth, which I will do in a second. But let's say that you were a previous customer and you had a paid premium charge in the past and your charges were above a certain level, then that creates a buffer as well before you start accumulating profit that would mean that you trigger an expert fee. So yeah, there are sort of two big caveats there. Lots of people misinterpreted that as sort of saying if you hit these levels over the course of a year, then you will automatically have to pay additional charges. That's not the case, especially if your lifetime P&L is negative. But also there's one massive thing that occurs here that means that you still may not pay any additional charges. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but in the next section I'm going to explain why, even if you do make a certain amount of money over the course of a year, you still may not pay any additional charges. So when we're talking about additional charges on Betfair, there's one thing that always seems to catch people out. And I think it separates people that obviously do it seriously from those that don't. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I always monitor this on all of my strategies to find out how efficient my strategy is and then how that affects what I do within any particular market. Difficult to explain, and this section will involve the use of a spreadsheet, but don't freak out because I put it on a spreadsheet so you can see clearly exactly what I'm talking about. Much easier than attempting to talk to you about it. But when we looked at the old premium charge, a lot of people worried about when they were coming up to that £250,000 mark in lifetime profits, but a lot of people still wouldn't pay the premium charge, even if they breached that £250 lifetime limit. And you're thinking, how is that possible? Well, it was all down to the rate at which they generated commission. And some people will be going, what's all this about? And, you know, there's a whole new level about to open up to you here, and that will explain the way that the exchange ecosystem actually works, as opposed to the way that you think it works, because people win every single bet that they ever place, don't they? Well, of course they don't. But that's how people think. And so when they think about paying 2% commission on a winning bet, that's where their focus is at any one moment in time. They're sort of saying, why should I pay 20% when I only pay 2% at this particular moment in time? But I can guarantee to you that you almost certainly don't pay 2%. You almost certainly pay commission above 2% in the long run. And if you don't understand why I've said that, then let's have a look at the detail behind this. So in this section, I'm going to talk to you about commission generated because it's an important contributor and it shows you how efficient you are on the exchange, and it influences heavily whether you pay any additional fees or not. So let me talk you through what you can see here. We are doing this over 100 iterations, so it could be 100 bets, 100 trades, whatever, and we're saying at the top here that it's, you know, whether we win or lose, it's 50-50. So 50 times we win. And I'm saying that when we win £1,000, and when we lose £1,000. So you can see on this first line of the spreadsheet here, we win £50,000, but we also lose £50,000, and therefore our gross profit is 0. Now, in the process of winning £1,000 at 2%, we would actually end up paying £1,000 in commission. So net of commission, we would actually lose slightly overall. So, you know, we haven't achieved a strategy here that has been profitable, but not only that, we've had to pay £1,000 commission on the way in as well. So in effect, the amount of commission that we generate against our profits is infinite. We haven't made any profits, and yet we've actually paid commission. So the commission generated is infinite, as the spreadsheet suggests here. So if you happen to make a loss during the week, or the amount of commission that you generate exceeds the amount of charges, then that will go into a buffer. And that buffer will offset any charges in future weeks. So yeah, you don't lose any privileges if you can't make money or you generate a lot of commission. It simply gets offset against future charges. But let's say that we've got a slight edge in this market. So on the second line here, you can see that we win 51% of the time and we lose 49% of the time by definition. And therefore you can see that we win £51,000, but we lose £49,000, and therefore we make a profit of £2,000 overall. But again, of course, we've had to pay 2% commission. So we pay £1,020 in commission, which means that obviously we make a net profit of about £1,000 or just under. And what that actually means is that we have generated overall £1,122.50. Now, I'm not going to talk about implied commission here because implied commission, whole different subject altogether. But in effect, what you can see is the amount of commission that we've generated is about 56% of the amount of money that we actually made in net profit. So on this particular occasion, that there will be no additional charges because the amount of commission that you generate gets offset against any potential charges. So you can see there will be no more charges here. We're only paying commission at 2%, but that has generated commission overall as a percentage of our gross profits of 56%. And therefore there is no additional charges to be paid. So you can see that the more efficient you are and the bigger you win, the less commission you generate as a percentage of the amount of profit that you make within a market. And that is more likely when the expert fee is going to kick in. However, if your strategy is just above break even, then the commission you generate is actually pretty high. And as a consequence, it's unlikely that you'll have to pay any additional fees on top of that. So a lot of whether you end up paying the expert fee is going to be down to how efficient your strategy is. I hope that that has explained that in enough detail and depth for you. What I've tried to do with this video is just flesh out your understanding and knowledge of the expert fee and also indicate whether you are likely to pay it, because it's not as simple as saying if you earn this amount in a year, then you're going to have to pay 20% of that to Betfair or 40% or whatever, or none, hopefully. It's much more nuanced than that, and people miss out on that, especially if people are trying to give a knee-jerk reaction to a change in terms and conditions. It's always been the case that the amount of commission that you generate is directly related to the strategy that you're deploying. So if you're a traditional punter, you generate enough commission that you'll probably never fall into these additional fees. And even if you're a trader, if you're just above that break-even mark and you're making, a small percentage of turnover in profit, then it's probably quite likely generating a lot of commission that will be offset against any additional charges, and therefore you may not even pay it in that particular occasion. However, if you are pretty efficient, then congratulations. However, you are going to probably end up paying more in fees. And that may be slightly, at the very top end of that, you may be slightly sort of worse off in the scheme of things. But, congratulations on doing so well and having a high strike rate strategy. I don't say that lightly because, you're talking to somebody here who went on the 60% rate on the premium charge when it was introduced. So yeah, I would prefer not to pay that at all or any charges, but you would sort of accept that within that process that is going to occur one way or another. There is a forum discussion on the expert fee, so you're welcome to join in there and talk to everybody and compare notes and discuss specific aspects of it. And in fact, James went on and he did a short list of all of the people who are likely to pay, the people who will be better off and those that may not be better off. So it's worth having a read of that to understand where you sit within those particular categories. But what I've tried to achieve in this video is to give you a more balanced view on the charges, how they're applied, but also specifically why you may not end up paying any expert fee at all.